Exactly 40 years ago tonight, Christmas Eve 1968, people in America and around the world were celebrating the birth of Christ. Each person had their own perspective on the meaning of that event and its impact on the world around them. But there were three people who had a unique perspective that Christmas tide. In 1968, American reality was largely defined by the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Several months earlier, the Soviets had successfully launched an unmanned probe from the Earth to the moon. In the paranoia of the time, American officials went into a panic that the Soviets might get a man to the moon before us. So the upcoming Apollo mission, Apollo 8, which was originally intended just to test a spacecraft in Earth's orbit, was recast to instead carry a crew of 3 from the Earth to the moon, to orbit the moon, and then return to the Earth. Through Herculean efforts, huge technical obstacles were overcome, and in late December, Apollo 8 took off, reached the moon on Christmas Eve, and completed 10 orbits before returning safely. For the first 4 of these orbits, the TV cameras on the spacecraft were pointed at the moon's surface, and viewers at NASA and in America's living rooms marveled at these first close-up pictures of Earth's natural satellite. But on the 5th orbit, the crew moved the cameras to show the world something that had never before been seen by a human being: the Earthrise over the moon's horizon. For the first time in history, people got to see the Earth from space, the whole planet floating in the blackness. From 250,000 miles away, pilot Jim Lovell could hold up his thumb in front of his face, and his thumb covered the entire Earth in the window. And then, in a moment that the mission is best remembered for, far more than for its technical achievements, 2 of the astronauts read aloud the first 10 verses of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day. Well, first off, I can't help but think how outraged some people would be today if a government employee on a government mission read from the Bible, but that's beside the point. Those verses of the creation narrative took on a whole new meaning to those astronauts as they watched the Earth light up in the sunlight as it came over the lunar horizon. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Those astronauts to this day talk about how fundamentally that experience changed their perception of the world, the creation, and their place in it. In a way, they got to see the world the way God sees it. A world where the maximum distance between any 2 people on the planet is the width of a thumb. Where we're all together on this tiny globe, floating in near infinite space. All on a journey together, a journey with the same origin and the same destination. It was a perspective that no human had ever had before, because no human had ever before been able to see the whole world at once. It's a shame we don't all get to go into space and look back and see this little island we live on, because maybe then we wouldn't worry so much about things like our country, our culture, and our stuff. Maybe we wouldn't be so focused on our perceptions of the world, which all of us are convinced are the only true perceptions, and instead focus more on the big picture. We live in a world where everything is relative to our particular understanding, based on where we happen to be situated on this planet and our immediate surroundings. You can see this just by watching international news or reading some international papers. If you watch CNN or another American network, you think that this whole world revolves around the United States, and all other countries look to us when deciding what they're going to do. But if you watch the BBC, you would think the whole world revolves around Great Britain. If you watch Japanese TV, you think the whole world revolves around Japan, and so on. The people of this world all function as if they are the center, and everyone else is at the periphery. Everything is relative, without any absolute point of reference, and so we have a world in constant strife and conflict. But whether we realize it or not, God has provided us with an absolute. There actually is a point around which this world revolves, a point we can all look to when we think about what to do, a place that is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. And that place is the stable in Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ came into the world. Not just as a baby, not just as a person, but as the incarnation of God, God coming into the world. Indeed, part of the theology of the incarnation is the coming of the absolute into the relative. The coming of Jesus, the incarnation of God, provided the absolute reference point from which all physical existence flows. Now, once we realize that and truly understand that, then we know that we are not the center of the world, nor is anyone else. Only Jesus is. And with that understanding come a host of epiphanies. If Jesus is the absolute, then I am no better and no worse than any of my billions of brothers and sisters in the world. If Jesus is the absolute, then all of us in this world share a common origin, a common journey, and a common destination. If Jesus is the absolute, then the maximum distance between any two people on the planet is no more than the width of a thumb. Christianity tends to focus on the saving work of Jesus, his death and resurrection that opened the way to us to eternal life. This work and our belief in it is foundational to our faith. But on Christmas, we remember and celebrate that for any of that work of salvation to happen, first Christ, first God, had to come into the world he wished to save. And he came into the world to call all people to himself, not just Israel, not just the people of the Roman Empire, but all people for all time over all the earth. And to do that, he had to overcome country and custom and language and culture, all of which are relative to each person and serve to keep us divided. He had to become the absolute, the one point of truth that could draw all people in. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Today we celebrate the second great coming of light into the world, the light which is the beacon to all people, the light which shines bright from a manger in Bethlehem. In this light, we can see past all that separates us and see the grace and truth that comes through Jesus Christ. Then we can see heaven.